Well, in this case, the finger that Jose demonstrated was an extended finger reaching home plate and helping Cleveland outlast the Mariners in a game, Zach, that was starting to feel a little like the Iron Man match between The Rock and Triple H at Judgment Day 2000. Back and forth. How was this going to end? I was waiting for The Undertaker to come out and swing things at the end. But victorious.
To completely botch it after an hour of wrestling. Those games, do you think that since they installed the new runner at second rule for extra innings, do you find those games being exhausting, more stressful? I mean, because there's some sort of rally or potential scoring situation in every half inning. And there's so much strategy involved with who to pitch to, who not to pitch to. Do you try to move the runner over? Do you swing away? And it is this crazy chess match. And I know some people are still, it's a very polarizing topic. I've come around to saying I like it. And this is what I'm saying is exactly why. There's action. But my God, it's nuts. And then you play like a 2-hour, 15-minute game now. But then the extra innings take just as long because there's so much happening.
Well, I think it incentivizes the hitters to not sway into try to hit home run territory, which is boring baseball. It can be boring just in a regular innings 1 through 9 where guys want to hit a home run. But it's magnified once you used to get to extra innings, and it just became almost like a home run derby. I just want to end this game. And oftentimes, like in golf, the harder you try, the worse you're going to do. And I think for a hitter, the more you're up there just trying to end the game, it's not going to work out. So to me, it's not about telling the hitters to change. It's removing the incentives or changing the incentives. And I felt like that's what the extra inning rule did. I'm sure guys are still up there trying to get extra base hits. But boy, does it change the strategy. And getting one run just doesn't feel like doing anything. If you're the road team and you get the one run, you're like, okay, that's great. That is kind of just extending the game. That feels more like you're guaranteeing another inning beyond the one that you're playing, but you want that second one. You want another one beyond that. And for Cleveland, we said this throughout the entire 2022 season, how impressive it was to watch a bunch of younger players that really had no business at times doing the things that they were doing, come back and win games that they should not have won. Yesterday was a case in which, when you look back at a season, you say you should have got this one or that one. Yesterday was a game that you shouldn't have had, and they still found a way to win it. Impressive. And it has me asking myself whether on April 9th there's such a thing as a big victory, a key victory. Can that be possible this early in the calendar?
Only in the sense that when you wind up with 90 wins and the Twins have 90 wins and you're saying, hey, thank God we got that one. Or you fall one game short. Well, no, that wouldn't make sense. If you finish one game ahead and you're saying, well, if we didn't, I mean, they're all 162 count the same, right? And yes, I think it's tough because, again, we want to react and overreact to every single thing that happens, and that's why baseball is not meant for Twitter or talk radio or whatever, because you get emotional and you're supposed to feel those things as a fan, but then the very next day something happens. I mean, the Oakland series, they had no business winning that first game. And they keep coming back and keep coming back. I mean, it's pretty similar. And then they win in extra innings. And then 2 days later, they're up 4-0. You think this is an easy win. And then they blow that in the 8th inning, and it's 4-4. And I think you're thinking, well, I mean, this is a game they have no business losing, but I just said 2 days ago that was a game they had no business winning. So point is, over the course of a season, a lot of this stuff can cancel each other out. However, this team is really, really good in extra innings, and it's not a fluke. They were 13-6 last year. They're 6-4 right now, and they're 4-0 in extra innings. If hey, teams playing the Guardians, just beat them in 9. If you can beat them in 9, you're golden. Otherwise, you're done. They're 2-4 in 9 innings, but they're 4-0 in extras. And we know why. It's when you get that runner at second base and you are a contact-oriented team, you're going to move that runner over. You're going to get him home. They're really good at those things. They're really good at slapping singles through a hole. They don't have to rely on the home run. And then they have a really good bullpen, a deep bullpen, and a bullpen that has the 4th best strikeout rate in baseball. So while they're really good at avoiding strikeouts at the plate, which is key because you got to keep moving runners in extra innings, that's the formula. They're really good at preventing that in extra innings. Maybe it didn't go so well at certain points on Sunday, but they're 17-6 in extra innings over the last 2 seasons.
What was more impressive, the slide by Jose at the end, trying to avoid the tag that came in from the catcher after Wong fielded it and threw it home, or the pose after touching home plate of Jose, and everyone has seen the picture now at this point. You tweeted it out, going very Kate Winslet as he's got one leg extended in the air, he's got the arms extended out.
Do you like my movie references?
Such a comfortable position. Did you see Titanic? Did you go to the theater to see that?
No, I saw it at a family friend's house.
Of course you did.
We were not allowed to watch that scene, though.
I'm sure they wanted to know why the VHS tape just kind of it goes out, in and out. It's like it's been worn out at this very specific spot. Young Meisel, why is that? What has happened here? Of course, we're dating ourselves, but there's a time where you have to know exactly where in the VHS tape it was going to be, so you'd have to fast forward, you would have the tracking time on it, and you'd have to remember exactly where you got to fast forward to.
Be kind, please rewind. I would say the slide because that always... I always marvel at that because you think about everything with baseball is split-second reactions, and I think what makes Jose Ramirez so great is that his instincts are so far superior than those of the other players on the diamond, and his baseball IQ is through the roof, and he's able to see things happen before they happen, and we've talked about it in terms of taking an extra base, knowing that he can beat that guy to that base, and there's not even going to be a play. He did it in Seattle in the opening series. But this is to know what sort of slide is going to be most effective. You can't plan that out. You don't get to sit there with Mike Sarbaugh at third base and say, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. If this happens, I'm going to slide this way, and I'm going to put my hand here, and I'm going to raise it at this point. And I mean, it's all instincts, and it's all just... It's like he's got eyes on the sides of his head. And it's so impressive. I mean, we've talked about it so many times, and I still think it's a very underrated trait. But he is ranked year after year after year at or near the top of the base running metrics. I mean, look at Fangraphs and just sort by base running. Go every single year. There was one year where he was in first. I don't remember who was second, but the difference between them was like the same as the difference between second and 15th. I mean, he is such a good base runner, and he's not that fast. So the way he's able to make things happen on the bases, it's all here. It's instincts. It's these, and I mean, you truly can create a list of examples of where his brain and his vision give this team extra runs, and in this case, a win.
We talked about it when we had Dre on a couple of weeks ago. Not only is he smart on the base pass, but picking up things that a pitcher is doing and then passing that along to teammates. You're watching this specific pitch and this specific count. We see him on the top step of the dugout. When he's not hitting, he's still there watching. And he's joking around and having fun. But he is always paying attention to everything. And to have that in your star player who then can pass that along to everybody else on a very young team, it's part of the value that we don't talk about in his WAR total, but it's immeasurable. For a team like this that doesn't have the experience that a veteran club would, to have a player like that is always paying attention and imparting knowledge, and I think making other people feel comfortable too. We talk about that all the time with Terry Francona. So very important. And I hope you're feeling comfortable watching this show. It is the Godcast. That's Zach. I'm TJ.
Oh, yeah.
As a reminder, this show is brought to you in part by SeatGeek. Godcast listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase with the promo code SELBY. Download the app. Save you some money over at SeatGeek. I know some of our listeners have done so and have shared that in the Discord. We do appreciate that. If you're not part of the Discord, consider supporting the show. Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast, where we do those midweek episodes in addition to these free ones that you're hearing on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, wherever you happen to be listening to your podcast. We're not having a pleasant conversation today, if not for two very key base hits by a guy that we've talked up on this show quite a bit, Will Brennan, who continues to prove that he needs to get those at-bats. And he's gotten quite a few at-bats. It's not like he's been glued to the bench here. I've been decently pleased with the way that Tito has worked his bench players in. But are we to a point now with Gonzalez still kind of scuffling and not showing us much? Does Brennan continue to eat into that playing time? And also, I think what goes into this, with Gonzalez, he's young enough. Is what's best for him to get him out of this funk? Just only facing left-handed pitching and playing 2 times a week? What are we going to see with that right field position now? What I can guarantee you is that Brennan needs to get more plate appearances than he's gotten here throughout the first week and a half.
Yeah, and I think, especially since Bell is struggling so much, and Bell and Gonzalez being so close in the lineup and being... I mean, Bell's drawn walks at least, but Gonzalez is going to swing at everything. So I think both of them scuffling to the degree they're scuffling is a pretty rough combination in the middle of the lineup. So, I mean, I don't know, but I would think you're going to see Brennan just earn more opportunities against right-handed pitching. You're going to see, I believe, 3 righties from the Yankees this week. So it would make sense. I mean, the one thing we know about him is he can hit. He did it every stop in the minors. I know it's been brief, but in his major league career, he's hit. And he just looks like he belongs. I don't know. It's just something there. You didn't answer me, so I assumed you were saving it for the podcast, but what did you think about my swing comparison? Because you said you thought Will Brennan's swing reminded you of someone and you couldn't put your finger on it. I thought I put my finger on it.
Remind me who you said again. And I said his stance, not necessarily his swing, but his stance.
All of it. I thought
with
Jody Garrett.
Oh, okay. I'd have to go back and watch more.
Left-handed, pretty upright. And then when the pitcher comes set, he kind of hunches back down and he's, I don't know, it reminds me a lot of him.
Well, the funny thing is, it actually looks a lot like Stephen Kwan as well, at least in the setup, with the bat extended vertically and very upright at the plate. But they're not totally the same. It was driving me crazy when I texted you, as I sat there, and then I started going, how do you find a specific batting stance when you don't know whose it is? There's no Wikipedia here where I could pull up and just go through old batting stances. The closest thing I was thinking of doing is firing up an old video game, because you remember when you would create a player, you could go through and you could cycle through the batting stances, and oftentimes it would have the player as you were doing it. And I thought maybe I could do that. I could go through and just find who the batting stance is that it's reminding me of. Garrett, maybe. I'm going to have to go back and watch some highlights of it. To me, what I had in my mind was, you know, those Cardinals, the very specific socks that the Cardinals wear. I couldn't get that out of my mind that there was a Cardinals player that had that sort of batting stance. For a second, I was like, maybe it's Matt Carpenter. No, it's not Matt Carpenter. It's very different. but I couldn't figure out who it was. It was driving me crazy.
How long ago?
I don't know if Garrett's it, but I'm going to go look at that. That's what I don't know. It was driving me crazy.
Are we talking like Ray Lankford?
It doesn't matter at all.
Fernando Vina?
No, Vina's batting stance is just like planted on the ground by Albert Bell. I've seen that highlight like 7 times here in the last, I feel like, a week. Vina getting belted by Bell. I don't know who it is. It doesn't matter at all. It does not do anything to push this show forward, but it was driving me crazy. So I don't know who it is.
I mean, I think this team is still so young, and so many of the players we're talking about are so inexperienced that I don't think there's anything wrong with just riding the hot hand. And that might come at the detriment of someone else's development, but that's sort of the position they're in. I mean, that happened last season. If Andres Jimenez doesn't get off to a good start and look really consistent and capable for the first couple months, wouldn't have surprised me if we would have seen Gabriel Arias at second base in the middle of last season. So I think you just have to do that. There's too many 24, 25-year-olds on this roster to sort of go with your gut feeling. I think you just have to go with who's producing.
Well, I get that, and I don't disagree with you. But I think they're also in the business of trying to get people worked out of whatever they might be working through if they are having struggles, and Gonzalez is clearly. So my thought is that it still benefits the team to have Gonzalez as the guy that's facing the left-handed pitching at the very least. But is that what's best for him, and is it what's best for the team in the long run if Gonzalez is not getting back to some level of the performance that he demonstrated last year? So that's what my question is here. How do they balance that? We saw when everything was working perfectly, they didn't have to really ask themselves that question too much last year. But if Gonzalez is scuffling, I understand wanting to give Brennan more at-bats. I agree with that. But what do you do with Gonzalez? It's better for the 2023 team if Gonzalez is there on the bench serving some sort of role, but is that what's best for him? And how do they balance that?
I mean, I don't know. I think this team is one stick short anyway, and the stick they're missing is someone who feasts on left-handed pitching. And the problem here is, I mean, anytime a lefty's been on the mound, it's been Gonzalez in the lineup, which is fine. I mean, he could face lefties, and he could be a home run threat off the bench and pinch hit the way Will Brennan's pinch hit. And then have Brennan start against righties for now. And Brennan might not pan out right away. Maybe it's short-lived. But I think it would be easier to say you could just send Gonzalez down to AAA to play every day and work things out if they had someone else who could step in and play the Geyer, Rayburn, who am I forgetting? Luplo role. They don't have that guy. That guy would pair perfectly with Brennan and Josh Naylor if they wanted to sit Naylor against some lefties too. I mean, it's actually kind of a similar conversation in that I know a lot of people were frustrated that Arias didn't pinch hit for Naylor with the bases loaded against a lefty reliever Saturday night. And the reason, I mean, they were saving Arias to pinch hit for the catcher a few batters later. The one thing there is you have to, if you're saying Naylor's not facing lefties, at least most lefties or lefties in critical situations, like there's no turning back from that. Because you're either letting him still prove that he can be an everyday player, or if you're ending that experiment now, how is he ever going to become a full-time player? So I think you have to give him chances. And again, part of the reason you have to give him chances is there's not, like Gabriel Arias isn't some lefty masher. Am I that much more confident in him facing a lefty than Naylor? No. And believe me, I've seen the stats of Naylor against lefties. It's just, you have to, I think in certain cases here, I mean, I'm kind of setting a double standard here, but at least Naylor has proven he can hit righties, and you need to learn the next step for him. With Gonzalez, I don't know what to expect from him against lefties, righties, aliens from another planet, I have no idea. And I know that Will Brennan is there and can eat up some of his playing time and possibly be effective. There isn't that. Like, if Richie Palacios was a known lefty masher, he'd be the perfect fit on this team. But they just don't have that guy.
Yeah.
Any of that make sense?
Well, no, it does. What I'm just thinking with Gonzalez, they have tried real hard to get him worked out of this funk. And I don't know how much of it is a mechanical thing he's doing or not doing at the plate, or how much of it is just he hasn't seen success at all in this calendar year, whether it was in spring training outside of a few games at the end and a few base hits here and there. He hasn't really demonstrated a lot to make him feel great about himself. And I'm not saying that confidence is a reason why someone excels or does not excel, but I think it's part of the equation. How do you get him worked out of this funk when he's only seeing a pitcher 2 times a week? Is that even important to this team? Is it only about Brennan's the better option, so we go with him? Gonzalez serves the best role as the left-handed platoon option with Brennan, so we just roll with that? And if that's not what is best for his development, so be it, because we're trying to win games right now, and nobody else fills that role as well as Gonzalez could. The only counter-argument I would have is I still want to see Arias play a little bit more and be in the mix more than even he has to this point. And not that I think he's going to mash lefties. I don't think that's I don't think that's part of his skill set. But it is a way to also get his bat into the lineup a little bit more against some pitching, give him more of a role.
The key for Gonzalez, he's had 31 plate appearances. You know how many times he's been ahead in the count? 7.
Like in 7 plate appearances total?
Yep. I mean, it's that simple. And pitchers know that. And you can spend all winter thinking, because this isn't a surprise. It's all the hitting coaches talk about with him. It's just hard. You are built a certain way. You are an aggressive hitter. You are a free swinger. You see something you like or you think you might like, you're going after it. And to completely change that mindset, it's really hard to do. And sometimes it works in your favor because he can get to certain pitches that other hitters can't. And that helps, especially when there's 2 strikes in the count. And he's swinging at junk, but he's staying alive, or he's putting it in play. But, how many times do you look up, he's at the plate, and it's 0-2, and now with the pitch clock, it's 0-2 in a hurry.
Well, they would have a better understanding of this than I would here initially. But is it something that the pitchers are doing different, or is it just bad sequencing, bad at-bats? What is it that has happened here? Because if it is pitchers making an adjustment to him, then obviously that's a concern for him and something he's got to adjust to himself. But are pitchers still doing the same things and he's just getting himself out? He's not demonstrating just a shade more patience? What is the case here with why he has not been great? Because the volatility is something we talked about all offseason. We talked about it in the season. When do you believe that this guy is good? We said it could be years. He's going to have to go against the grain for years before we're truly going to believe that what he has done to this point is something he's going to continue to do for the rest of his career. So it's not shocking that he would begin the season in the first week and a half slow. And that's the other part of it. It's totally unfair. It's all we have to go on in 2023. But that's the sample size. It's magnified so much more compared to if you go through a week and a half stretch in July. No one's paying attention to it because your numbers are what they are. But when you start the year slow like he has, like Josh Bell has, it's all you think about. And as a hitter, it's all you see when you stroll to the plate and you see your numbers on the scoreboard and you're hitting 083 or whatever whatever it is. It makes me wonder, when Josh Bell hits into a fielder's choice to win the game, is that beneficial just because he's getting slapped on the ass and the head and everyone's happy and you did that in some way by at least just putting the ball in play? I don't know. We lose sight of it all the time, but this is still a game played by human beings, and they're going to feel panicked. They're going to feel great. It's all part of it.
His chase rate is in the 3rd percentile. It's not what you want. His whiff rate's up considerably over last season. I know it's been 31 plate appearances, so this is not a referendum on the guy, but making a lot less contact in the zone, which it's just... I feel like if you're a hitter with that skill set and those tendencies, and you get off to a slow... I mean, you probably just feel like you're swimming upstream, and there's no end in sight. It's got to be tough. I don't know what the answer is. Otherwise, I would be the team's run production coordinator.
The thing is, you just list those stats to me, and it's like, of course. That's the style of hitter he is. That's kind of brings me back to, are the pitchers doing something different to him? Is he doing something different? I don't know. I don't see a drastic difference. It's just he had better luck last year on those things. This year, not luck is a bad word, but he's not succeeding in the same way. Is it just because he goes through stretches like this, or is it because there's a physical adjustment that he needs to make?
So, and this leads me to thinking about the offense as a whole, because it looks like they're playing the exact same style, right? They're slapping the ball all over the place. They are blooping and getting defenders to collide into each other at what seems like a ridiculous rate, and running all over the place. And you think, okay, well, we've seen this before, and it was effective for them, but is it going to work when it really matters in October and it's hard to string hits together? And I'm not there yet, because they're tied for last in the majors in home runs. They have 5. Tied with the Nationals and Tigers. That's not the company you want to keep. But if you think about it, Jose Ramirez has 0. Josh Bell has 0. Oscar Gonzalez has 0. So that's not going to stay that way. What happens when Ramirez starts hitting for some power, when Bell starts hitting for some power, when the weather heats up, the ball flies a little more? And then what does this lineup, what does this offense look like in that situation? I think this offense has a pretty high ceiling. I think they've built a foundation with that style from last season. I think it's even more effective now with the new rules. I think Will Brennan fits that style pretty well. When Miles Straw is going the way he's going, and I'm not saying he's going to finish the season with a .488 on base percentage, but we talked about it. I mean, he really can elevate this lineup. The power threat Zunino provides. I think the lineup is set up for some good things.
Just looking at this, the team in last place for barrels per plate appearance, your Cleveland Guardians, in 30th at 2.6. And to give everyone a understanding of where everybody is at right now, the Tampa Bay Rays can't be stopped. They're at 10 barrels, 10%, I'm sorry, barrels per plate appearance percentage here. They're at 10. Middle of the pack would be around 6. The Guardians at 2.6, which is kind of surprising they sit where they're at. You look at what their record is. We gave them all sorts of love for having a very good West Coast trip. They come home, they drop 2 out of 3. Overall, they're still on pace, for whatever that's worth, in the first week and a half of the season for a 600 win percentage. I think most of us would be pretty pleased if they did that over the course of an entire season. And they're doing that, and they're still scoring some runs with basically no power, no barrels. And as you said, it's going to get better. Even if they're not among the best in baseball, I think they're capable of being somewhere closer to the middle of the pack this year with the names that you just listed. So that is going to change. And how they score runs are going to change. We're not going to see Miles Straw continue to hit over 330 throughout the entire season. I don't think. If he is, they're probably going to change up the lineup a little bit. Maybe we'll see him back in the leadoff spot. They can get the guy out of the 2-hole that everyone is screaming about right now.
Actually, if you hit 330, you bat 7th in this lineup. So,
can they have 2 7-hole hitters between him and Jimenez? Figure out a way to get them both as few plate appearances as possible. We have done this for basically a decade now with Tito. We ask, when is the right time to move guys around? Is a week and a half into the season too quick to do it? He's already made some subtle changes. He's moved Bell around a little bit. He's moved Naylor up and down based on maybe wanting to take some pressure off of Bell. Rosario, though, for the better part of now 3 seasons, continues to find himself in that 2-hole. We know, to me, we know that Rosario is going to get hot at some point. The question is, when he is not, when he starts the year slow, like he pretty much has the first 3 years we've seen him here in Cleveland, can you bump him down? And then when he's hitting 400 for a 3-week stretch and has his 7th multi-hit game in the last 9 ball games, can you bump him back up then? Can you just take advantage of the hot hand now? And if you could, how are you stacking the top of the lineup now?
The same way I said I would stack it when I was asked this question over the offseason. Thinking a mailbag and at the end of the year. I would go Juan, Ramirez, Jimenez. Well, that's when I thought Bell was going to be the savior and you could stick a switch hitter in the cleanup spot, split up some of the lefties. So I guess maybe I'd go Juan, Jimenez, Ramirez. Not so worried about lefty-lefty with Jimenez and Juan. I mean, Jimenez had an 887 OPS against lefties last year. That you can't find a split where he struggles. So he shouldn't be hitting 7th. And I know a lot of fans are probably saying, why doesn't the media ask Tito and demand change? Nothing's going to happen. First of all, Tito's not going to make a lineup change because a reporter asked about it. But second of all, and we talked about this, and we don't have to pull back the curtain here, do inside baseball stuff. But there is a tact you have to take with it. And this has been asked many times. We ask about the lineup daily, constantly. But that doesn't mean you're getting the answer you want. Like if I ask, or Paul Hoynes asks, why is Jimenez hitting 7th when he's hitting 340 and Ahmed Rizzo? Because you know one thing about Terry Francona is he's never going to throw a player under the bus publicly. And when you ask about lineup stuff, the reason why we never get the answer that's satisfying fans is because he can't talk about moving Jimenez up without talking about moving someone else down. And that's why anytime we've asked about it last year or even the year before, you're not getting the answer. Like that's how this goes. So I'll be honest, I was thinking about asking about it Saturday. I think Jimenez was hitting 7th. And we were in the press conference room, and I just could not come up with the right wording. And then he hit 5th Sunday. We didn't have a pregame session with Tito. I'm planning to ask about it today. This is Monday. Depending on where Jimenez hits, I think I found the right wording that can maybe get an answer that is useful. But again, just so many times you ask and you just get something really short and not anything worth writing about because the assumption is that by asking and why don't you move Jimenez up, you want him to explain who he wants to move down, and he's not going to do that.
As if he hasn't thought about it a million times too.
Right.
You're the first person to bring it up. No, the art of asking it is as critical as asking it, period. And I was thinking about it before the show started, how I would go about it. I'm curious how you will as well. But I think you have to approach it. We've talked about this before, not just with Terry Francona, but really in any conversation. You get to know these managers, these players. You want to remove the crutches they use all the time, the phrases they use all the time. So the key to asking the question is to use those phrases in your question. They can no longer use them as part of the answer. So you would say something to the effect of, Tito, we've talked about lineups now with you, and when is the right time to move guys up and down for the better part of a decade. We know this is a conversation that's difficult. We've also seen Ahmed Rosario get through stretches where he's red hot. You can't get the guy out, and you can't wait to see him come up to the plate. Right now, he's not in one of those stretches. Do you consider shifting the lineup here? When is the right time? And is it a conversation you have with Rosario where we want to rely on you, but right now we want to also rely on guys that are getting a little bit hot, and once you are in that territory, we again could revisit reshuffling the lineup a little bit. But I think the key is with Tito to make sure that he understands that we've heard this 1,000 times. We don't need to hear the exact same thing again. We need specifics on this very situation. And when do you want to give credit to Rosario and say, yeah, there are times when he's red hot. You don't want to just say, this guy stinks, because then Tito gets into defensive mode and it becomes more about defending the player than actually addressing the question. That's why it's important in how you phrase it. You want the actual answer and the walkthrough on what the mindset is of making a decision like this, as opposed to getting a manager in a position where they're going to tell you everything you've heard 1,000 times, or they're just going to defend the player that you're requesting gets bumped down in the lineup.
Sometimes you have to ask something unrelated. Well, tangentially related, so that it doesn't, because I think there's a disconnect here. I think fans want us to yell at the manager, tell him he's stupid and that it should be this way. But first of all, the sessions here are not, I mean, they're valuable in the sense that gives you content, gives us something to talk about, but what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish with this? Again, he's not changing the lineup because we're asking about it. And he's not changing the lineup if we don't ask about it. So you think about it, and fans just want, it's an outlet. It's frustration. I totally understand it. But it's difficult because you're trying to juggle a bunch of different things. And so I'm thinking, kind of like you said, you don't want, he's not going to respond well if he feels like you're ambushing him. And the way I think a lot of fans, at least the way they've voiced it to me, I've gotten several emails on the topic this weekend, is just wanting, just walk into the room and say, what the F, right? And that's, one, not going to get an answer. Two, whatever he says is not, I mean, you're not, like, what do you want as a fan? What do you want him to say, I guess is the point. And because you're frustrated with how Rosario's playing, and Jimenez deserves to bat higher, him explaining, even if he explains himself, that's not going to make you, it's not going to satisfy you, because it's not going to, if he's explaining this is why it is, and this is why I think it should say this way, you're not satisfied by that, because it's not going to change. So you have to almost, because I'm kind of going through this in my head now, just to confirm this is the way I want to approach this. Because I wrote down some notes over the weekend and I've changed it about 4 times. But I think you need to ask a question and then let it naturally arise that then you talk about Jimenez and how he's good no matter the situation. We've seen him hit lefties, we've seen him hit righties, and there's a lot of value in that because it's one position you don't have to platoon. And given how durable Jimenez is and how athletic he is, to be able to have his bat in the lineup every single day is the reason he just landed a $100 million contract, right? So having that value there, that you have one guy for one position, you can play him every day, you have an answer, then what is it that makes him the right fit for the 7th spot in the lineup? Why there? There's some way to sort of just transition naturally without just walking in and demanding change.
Yeah, I think it's understanding from his position. I can almost hear the answer now that you want to have a a lineup that is lengthy, that can do damage at any point throughout that lineup, that no pitcher can take a 2 or 3 hitters off in a row at the bottom of the lineup. I get it. As a manager, I want that too. I want that out of my 7, 8, and 9 hole. The guys, I feel like, can still do damage down there. But is it worth it when you see teams walking your walking your leadoff hitter to get to your number 2 hitter, walking your number 3 hitter to get to your 4-hole hitter?
But that's the thing, TJ. If he gives that answer, is anybody happier that they heard that answer?
No. Well, see, here is why I want to actually hear the physical walkthrough as opposed to defending the player that you want bumped down or any of these other reasonings. Because if you tell me, here's what, like for Terry Francona, if he says, here's what I'm looking for, here's when I start to make a decision, just in generalities, then when we approach that point that he just described, then you can't apply more pressure. Because, Tito, you said when it gets to this particular point that you're thinking about making a change. We are at that point now, or we're nearing that point now. It's why you want someone to be on the record with their answer. You want to have that, because then you can then bring their words back, and it's not you putting words into their mouth. It's none of that. Tito said this. We are to that point. Whether it's about when do you take a guy out of a rotation, when do you take a closer out of a closer spot, when do you bump a guy down the lineup, once he has said these things and you get the actual answer, then it becomes a weapon, I guess, you can use as a reporter to then approach that later, because you've got the answer. Now you can approach it again with what they actually said. And that's why it is important to approach it the right way, as opposed to, as you said, just ambushing the manager and not getting any answer whatsoever.
Yeah, there's an art to it. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm just, I want to go easy on the manager. And again,
but that's not it.
We talk about lineup construction constantly. We ask about it all the time. But you're not benefiting anyone if you just walk in and you say, Rosario sucks. Why aren't you moving him down? You have to go about it the right way to get an answer that, I don't know, maybe the readers will be pleased with, because
no one's going to be pleased with the answer unless the answer is, well, actually, Zach, here's my lineup card today, and I bumped him down. That would be the answer that would make everyone happy in the moment.
But you're right. I mean, they spend tons of time talking about this stuff every day, too. It's not like they haven't considered changes. Terry Francona keeps he's got this piece of paper on his desk every day that has the lineups for the next 3 or 4 games. And it's just how he and DeMarlo Hale and Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff map things out. And they're trying to make sure they get certain guys in and thinking ahead. Constantly, there are names crossed out, scribbled out, changes made. I think there are, first of all, a lot of things happen. Guys are nicked up. Guys are scuffling. Guys suddenly get hot. And I mean, I haven't seen the lineup for Monday evening against the Yankees, but if I had to guess, I would say Will Brennan would be starting in right field. Would I have guessed that a couple days ago? Maybe not. So the wheels are always spinning. But I'm with you. Again, I think Jimenez deserves a hit in the top third.
Well, the wheels were certainly spinning, so to speak, for fans wanting changes to be made in the rotation after the first start by Zach Plesac. And credit where it's due, he came back and didn't have a great beginning. But, I mean, it was a big boy game for him. They needed a game like that. Now, obviously, they still ended up needing to rely on the bullpen a lot because of extra innings. But that was a big start for him, big start for the team, and against an offense that you want to be able to slow down a little bit. So credit where it's due. The thing is with Plesac, a very frustrating pitcher, but I also disagree with those that are ready to kick him to the curb. I don't think you just get rid of a guy that I think even at his, I guess what the average performance for him would be, like somewhere over a little over a 4 ERA. I don't know. I'm not ready to just say, just cut this guy or just send this guy away. I think there's still value in that over the course of an entire season. And oh, by the way, on April 10th, I'm not looking to cut ties with a guy that I think can at least give you, I think he can give you performances like that. Now, is that all going to be all the time? No. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. And it's not a guy who, as we've said a million times, that I want to be starting a playoff game with. But in early April, I'm going to give a guy like that a chance to see if he can get his way worked out of it. And if you get a little bit deeper into the season and you got to make a change because he's not performing, we'll get there when we get there. But I want to at least give him the opportunity to turn in more performances like he did on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that doesn't mean he's got to hold on to that job till July 4th or maybe even Memorial Day. But you need that. This rotation is sort of a mess, right? And Hunter Gaddis is going to oppose Garrett Cole on Tuesday. And I mean,
it's a win. I'm already marking it down. That's a big W right there.
Right? I just think, I mean, the key guy to me is Cal Quantrill. You need him. He was so reliable and consistent the last 2 years, and you need him to be that guy because Tristan McKenzie, the news is good. He's going to throw weighted balls this week and then could start a throwing program as soon as the end of the week. So they're optimistic about his timeline. No symptoms or anything. He's feeling great. So they just have to build him back up now. I don't know how long that'll take, but you need to bide your time for another month with this group probably. And as great as Tanner Bybee and Logan Allen look at AAA and Gavin Williams looks through one start at AA, you can't just assume that those kids are going to come up and be better than Plesac or better than Hunter Gaddis. You think they might be. You hope they are. Their stuff is certainly more tantalizing, but it's just a lot to ask. So that's going to happen at some point. You're going to see those kids this year, but you have to let this play out because the way this team plays, you just need to keep them in the game. The strengths of this team are the bullpen and the never say die offense. The problem is they lead the league in relief innings. That's not where you want to be at any point on the calendar, including 10 games in. You're putting too much of a strain on them. You know, the extra inning record is great, but if you're really running through these guys as often as they are, that's going to hurt you in the long term. So they need, I think, I'm saying this after Plesac went one inning in his first start, but there's more of a track record to believe, especially with, the way you see young pitchers. Like, young pitchers don't come up and throw 7-8 innings in a start, right? You kind of have training wheels on them initially. So at least with Plesac, there's a chance he goes 6 or 7. You have to let him go for another few starts at least.
And kind of to your point where with Naylor, once you say he's no longer facing left-handed pitching, where do you go from there? For Plesac, if you were to make a change and you were to stick him in the bullpen, it's not as Carlos Carrasco famously demonstrated, it's not the end. It's not as if you can't ever bring him back to being a starter. But in some ways, you're kind of saying we're done with him as being a starter unless circumstances dictate that we bring him back there. And in April, I'm not ready to make that call. Knowing what we know about rotations and starting pitching, I need as much of it as I can get. And for him, yeah, he has outings like he had in Oakland and makes you want to punch a wall watching him. But at the same time, he still has proven he is capable of having these outings like he did against Seattle. There were times throughout last year where he had some real good starts. And if that means that he averages somewhere close to being like a league average ERA pitcher, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse depending on the day, I don't know. I'm not just running from that. I know I'm going to need more of that throughout the entire season. That's why I'm going to continue to give him the opportunities.
Yeah, it might not be the long-term answer, but it's a short-term necessity.
Right.
And, Curry's kind of interesting to me, too, but Gaddis is still a huge question mark. I mean, you don't know that he's going to be able to lock down that spot in the rotation for... I mean, I think he's kind of on the same track as Plesac here. So when McKenzie comes back, I think it applies more pressure. Because at that point, you're going to have to make a decision. Someone's got to go. If Gaddis is pitching well, maybe it is Plesac if he's struggling. But more likely, it's probably Gaddis, and then you can make a determination on, all right, Bybee, Allen look like the real deal. Let's get one of them up, and let's do something with Plesac.
I didn't want to bury it at the end of the show. It might end up being something worth watching, but at the same time, I don't know how much I have to add to it. But the discussion's been out there as far as Emmanuel Clase goes, and the velocity not being great, at least compared to where it was at the beginning of the season. Now, or beginning of last season, and we've typically seen throughout his career. On one hand, it feels real silly for me to be paying attention to the velocity of a guy that still on his worst days is averaging between 97 and 99 miles per hour. At the same time, we have not seen the same sharp Clase. His walks have been much higher, command not as good. Interestingly, he's relied more on the cutter than the slider. The slider has actually been performing really good, and it's curious to me. The reason why I'm not suggesting anybody should be in full panic mode, but a guy like Clase, we have seen this seemingly relies a lot on getting into the rhythm of the season, pitching 2-3 days in a row. Once he gets into that, he almost just takes off and becomes the best version of himself. And I wonder how much of the beginning of a season when it's cold and yucky and you're not getting maybe the sort of regular appearance work that you would throughout the regular season once it actually kind of gets underway. I just don't know how much to take away from these early season performances from him, but the command is not there and the velocity is not there. Even compared to where he was at this previous April in 2022, it's down like a tick to a tick and a half on that cutter. So is it something worth watching? Is it something worth visiting with the manager?
It's down.
What do you think about Clase?
It's down a little bit, but it's just been inconsistent. 5 appearances. Average cutter velocity, 98.7. Then the very next day, 96.5. Then 97.9. Then 98.6. Then 97.7. So it's fluctuated. I talked to the bullpen coach about this because there's a few things that can be in play. Number one, I mean, it's cold. Usually velocities are down a little bit in April. I think that's what pitchers would tell you at least. And the pitch clock could factor into this. He doesn't have as much time to collect himself and then throw as hard as he possibly can. Maybe that factors in. I had an interesting chat with the bullpen coach who said, I was asking, how can he be better? And thinking of it just in terms of what he's done the last 2 seasons, and you really have to nitpick to find anything wrong with his performance. And they've prioritized, they want him throwing more cutters up in the zone because they think he can get more swing and miss from that. You raise the eye level and then you drop the slider down, and that can be effective. And you've seen him doing that more. The one thing that the bullpen coach said that kind of made me raise an antenna, he said we need him to just be strong and stay strong so he can throw consistently hard for 10, 15 years. And he pointed to Aroldis Chapman being able to throw 103 forever. And it just made me wonder, is there something there where maybe he's got to work his arm into shape, and maybe we'll see in June and July he's firing 101 again, but it just takes more time?
Yeah.
And is that something...
That was kind of my thought.
Is that something he could have done over the offseason or in spring training to start that progress sooner? The guy also made 77 appearances last year, and I know a lot of those outings were like 7 pitches. And I know he's not a guy who throws many warm-up pitches, so it's usually just get the arm warm, get out there. pitch for 3 minutes, and then you're done. But I don't know. I mean, this is all, I'm just throwing out what I've heard. I'm not dogging the guy's work ethic. I'm not suggesting he's got something going on with his arm, but it's just, it is interesting, and I do think it is worth watching, and I think that comment is just going to stick with me until he's throwing 100 miles an hour again.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. It seems like it takes a little bit for his arm to get where it needs to be, and I really do believe he relies a lot on pitching a lot to just get him, whether it's mechanically, whether it's just in how he feels, whether it's the velocity. In fairness, the guy that we first saw throwing 102 cutters, that wasn't even him last year. His velocity was settled more in the 99 to 101 range very comfortably. We didn't see as much of those, like, knock you on your ass, you can't believe that pitch just came out of his hand territory. But he still proved damn special reliever. So, to me, that's part of why I'm not in full panic mode about it. I think there are just way too many factors that it could be for me to ever truly freak out on April 10th. It's kind of my point here. I as the years have unfolded and we've done this show, the way I kind of think about it is anything where it could be something or it could be nothing, I think it's worth just giving me a little bit more of a sample size. It could be something. It could be very, very scary. Or it could be absolutely nothing, and it's not worth me spending energy and time getting too worked up about it when we could be in May, and this is a thing we laugh about. Like, why do we even have that conversation about him? So I'll watch it. I'll keep it in the memory banks. I'll continue to make notes of it. But
I mean, he was throwing 99 and 100 last April. So I'm skeptical on the cold weather stuff.
Yeah, I'm
Pitch
not huge on that either.
Could be a factor, though. That is interesting.
Well, I was looking at it real quick as you were talking. He was at 22.8 in tempo last year, which is kind of down towards the bottom. Not the worst. Like Giovanni Gallegos was at nearly 26 last year. This year he's had to speed it up to about 16, which is still not like among the fastest workers, but he's had to speed it up a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to do, and I don't even know if your body just gets used to it. Then do you just get used to it? You just start throwing the way that you once did? Do you need that extra time to throw with velocity? I don't know. So I just need more of a sample here. I need more data before I make any long-term determinations. I would like to see maybe if he's going to continue working through this. Let's see more of the slider, because I think it still has great vertical movement, still has great horizontal movement. Compared to the league average, it's well above it. If the cutter's not going to be like lights out amazing, let's just see more of the slider a little bit until you feel better about where the cutter's at velocity-wise.
Yeah, it's lowish on the list of things to be concerned about, I think. It helps that the bullpen is just, I don't know. They could throw Eli Morgan out there in the 10th inning to protect a 2-run lead, and he's looked great. That slider has really elevated his arsenal. But they have so many relievers they can bring in, and I'm like, yeah, they'll probably get the job done.
Yeah, for Clase, I'm more concerned with the 19% strikeout rate, 19% walk rate. Just avoid some of the walks there and see what happens with the rest of it. Let the rest of it play out. But yeah, let's give a little bit more time, a little bit more data before bumping that up on the panic meter. Any last-minute takeaways from opening weekend? You glad that that's behind you now?
It's gone fast. We're already 10 games in. It's like one game of an NFL season.
And you know what that means? We've learned everything we need to learn about the team.
See you Saturday at the Collectors Convention.
Yeah. We'll put some more details out on that on Twitter. We've already done that on Discord. And find us at Patreon. Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast. We're out of here. See ya.